we'll start off with your full name and your date of birth.
It's Richard Marcus, born August 19th, 1942 in Bothwell, Ontario.
Very nice. So one little thing I really like asking people is where their name came from. Because some people have interesting stories if it was like their father's name or their grandparents' name and got passed down, or...
Well, as far as I know, when I was born, as soon as I realized people were calling me by name, they called me Dick. So all through public school, that's what they called me. All the people around this area call me Dick. And through my life on different jobs I worked at the airport at London. And of course, when you work there, the same as sort of here, write out your name, and my official name is Richard Marcus. So naturally, they started calling me Richard. Nobody knew me over at the airport. So pretty soon, about 1985, in that vicinity, I got used to being called Richard because everybody at the airport called me Richard. So now, when I come to this part of the country, I do run into, I call them old school people that call me Dick. Mm-hmm. And so I says, oh, you're old school. And some people know me by that I've forgotten, or even new people that talk to other people. So it's strange now for people to call me Dick. When they say that, I think, who are you talking about? I'm so used to Richard. So I try to get people converted over to Richard. So that's sort of how my name, I don't know how they come up with that, but that's what I got stuck with.
Yeah. So you said you were born in Bothwell?
Yes.
So how long after did you move? Because I know you lived across the street in the
Yes.
White House.
When we were in Bothwell, shortly after when I was born, I don't really know the time span, but maybe 6 months, less than a year, we moved over to the little white house at Little John's, mm-hmm. the one closest to the road. And we rented that for a few years, I think. And then this house across the road became available, and my dad and mother moved from the Little John house into this one here. It was owned by John E. Pierce, that lived up in the big white house on the corner across from Pete Hentz. Mm-hmm. So then I lived there all through public school, 8 grades. Then I went to high school in West Lorne High School. And then from there, I took a drafting course, which I ended up in Toronto completing. And then from there, I thought, oh boy, here I go, let's get drafting. So I had a aunt that lived in London. She says, every day I go past M.M. Dilling Consulting Engineer's office on her way to work, and there's great big windows and draftsmen up in there drafting. So, well, it's a good place to start. So I went in with my drafting certificate. Boy, I'm really in the right spot. And this building had I think it was 2 stories, and the survey drafting department boss was upstairs. So I'd go up these big stairs similar to the one in the museum here. And there was another fellow came in about the same time, so the 2 of us went up. And we were sitting there being interviewed by the guy that hires people from M. Dillon. So I was talking about drafting, and all of a sudden up the stairs came these big heavy footsteps, and it was one of their survey crew leaders. Their they had about 8 survey crews, I think, and his crew members decided they didn't like doing what they were doing, and they walked off the job. So he says, get me somebody fast, to the guy that was hired, the new personnel. And so, to my dismay, me and the other fellow were sitting there like we are now, and the leader says, how'd you guys like to work on a survey crew? And I thought, how neat's that? Going to be a draftsman, but it's a paycheck. So I says, okay, let's go. And the other guy agreed. So we went with the survey crew leader. He was happy instantly. He had a new crew.
Mm-hmm.
So we went downstairs to his vehicle and we climbed in this car he was driving. I'd never been in a Thunderbird before. He had a 1959 Ford Thunderbird, really nice, great big car. We climb in, boy, I'll survey every day if I get a ride around this thing. So anyway, we went out to what is now Wonderland Road and Oxford Street. Back then, when I started, I just don't have the date on my mind when it was. But anyway, it was a long time ago, and at that time there was no buildings, no houses, nothing. It was country.
Mm-hmm.
Goldenrods this high. We're walking through fields, and I don't know if you're familiar with that area now, but it's solid malls and high rises, and
yeah,
the city goes right out to beyond Byron now in London. So that's how I become a surveyor. In my resume there, you'll see it says surveyor. And then I did that for 13 years or more. And the government, Dillon's decided they had a bridge collapse in Ottawa, and they had to lay off a lot of staff. So I thought, well, I can survey and I can draft. And somebody says, well, I'll go to the airport. And I got a job out there with the engineers doing surveying and drafting at the airport, London Airport. So I did that for about 1982, I believe. No more surveying department, no more. They had a surveying department, but they moved it all to Toronto.
Mm.
So I said, not going to Toronto, it's no place for me. So I said, see ya. So I hung around our office. There was nobody in it. They'd taken all the furniture out, and I was there quite a while. One day, there was a phone that would ring once in a while, and I'd answer it. One day a phone rang, and they said, how'd you like to be a fireman? And over just like a block away on the other side of the airport, the 3 firemen were retiring. And so there I am. They said, how'd you like to be a fireman? So I says, sounds good to me. So over I go and talk to the fire chief, and he says, what do you know about firefighting? And I says, well, not very much. I know fire extinguishers and stuff like that. So he hired me. I just transferred from one government department over to another one. And he just simply said to me, see that fireman over there? He says, follow him around, do what he does or do what he tells you to do. And I did that for 6 or 8 months, and pretty soon I knew as much as he did. So I just sort of became a fireman there. So
wow,
that's pretty much and then 2002, I retired.
very nice. What a whirlwind of careers.
That was back in the days. I don't know. I did fill out an application at the airport, but I wasn't in the M.M. Dillon office long enough to fill anything out. The guy came in and wanted some helpers, and out we went.
Yeah.
They must have filled one out for me, an application. So anyway, that was pretty much my whirlwind career.
So, what were your parents, like your father's jobs?
Good question. I don't know if you remember, but down just past Little John's, present Little John family home, the big long one down here, I believe Jamie Littlejohn moved down and he is now living in the Lister homestead. But the Lister homestead and the farm right next to him, Frank Smith used to own that, a farmer guy. And my dad run there was oil wells there. And he used to pump oil from about 400 feet down the ground. There's oil down there, and there still is. If you go down the road and dig 400 feet down, you would hit oil.
Wow.
But they're old wells that they peter out over the years. Like they might pump 20 barrels a day at the beginning, and as time wears on, maybe 10 years later, they're only pumping 1 or 2 barrels a day. So it got to the point where my dad was getting older. He wanted to retire. The wells were pumping less and less. But I know he used to fill one of those big black train cars. You know, you see the trains pulling them tank cars.
Mm-hmm.
He used to fill one of those a month.
Wow.
From the oil he got out of the ground just down the road by the Lister's farm now.
Yeah.
So, and my mother, she just stayed at home and looked after kids and run the show, I guess.
So did you have any siblings?
Yes, I had 5. I had 4 sisters. And I think there were 6 of us. And there's 2 of us left. My sister lives in Peterborough. She's in her high 80s now. So, but the other ones, they're all in St. Peter's Cemetery.
Nice, yeah. It's a nice place there.
Nice and quiet.
Yeah.
They fixed it up pretty nice down there now. They've cut the trees and all along the side. And one day we met the minister, I guess you call him, from St. Peter's Cemetery, and he had a big, I don't know what to call it. I call it a thing. It's he poured a concrete base, put a big stainless steel, I guess you'd call it a vault, on top of the concrete. And one day we met him in there, and I didn't know that belonged to him. And I says, "What's this thing over here?" And he didn't know what to think of me calling this. It's his resting place where his ashes are. He's going to be in this. He's going to go in this container. And he says, "Well, this thing belongs to me, and that's my final resting place." So I don't know if you'll ever hear me say that. He did say that.
Yeah. Nick Wells actually works close with us as well, and we we were all in disbelief when we saw that he made his own big monument over there, and we were like, "Oh, okay."
And I wasn't aware who he was, and I was calling it that thing over there. And he didn't have. He agreed it was a thing. So yeah, it's the only time I ever met him.
So are you like a middle child, or?
Pretty much, I guess you could say that. I'm sort of in the middle. My sister's the oldest. I'm in the middle, and the rest all passed away. They got cancer and all the other usual things that happens to people. So there's 2 of us left.
So you moved to the house across the road, and your dad, I'm assuming, was still doing the oil pumping and everything?
Yeah, he did that all his life down there.
So what do you remember about school?
What, public school?
Yeah. Were you in a one-room schoolhouse?
Yeah, we were in the Triconal public school down the road, which is not there anymore. I think it burnt down. It was converted into a house, and I think it burnt. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they rebuilt it. Somebody lives there now. So, yeah, I spent 8 years down there. And
was there a lot of kids there?
Well, there was 8 rows of desks, and about, the people that I went through school with was 3 girls and 3 boys. We all went through the grades together. And so there was 6, 5 to 8 in each row, depending on how many was down there. But they gets a little vague who I went to. I remember some of them, and I still know some of them are still around. So then I hit high school.
Right.
So got picked up by a bus every morning. Wasn't used to that. So went to high school for the usual stint through there.
Yeah, that was probably a big change. I'm assuming you probably just walked to school or rode a bike to school.
Yeah, rode a bike
when you were
to
younger.
school. Yeah. There was one little story. I guess I can talk about people's names and things I did there.
Yeah.
There was the Gauss that lived up from Little John's on the Docker side road. You know them or heard of them? They had a son, Greg Gow, and he had I'm not sure what they call it. Like he couldn't walk. Do you know what? Muscular dystrophy, I think it was. He could walk, but not like everybody else. He was like half as slow.
Right.
So I always think it's nice. School would get out at 4 o'clock. Everybody would hop on their bikes. His sisters, he had 2 or 3 sisters. They just went off walking home all the way down here up Docker Side Road. Poor old Greg, he puddled along behind. So somehow I took sympathy on him and I put him on the crossbar of my bike. I had a pretty nice big bike. And we come down the road twice as fast as most of them because a lot of them were, his sisters were walking. And I would get to my house just across the road and I'd let Greg off. And then he continued walking, but he was from Triconal ahead of him. So I often wondered what they thought of me giving him a ride home on the bike every day. But
do you remember your school teachers at all? Was it pretty much the same one the whole
Gert Page. I'm not sure how she's related to Morley. I think
Husbands were brothers.
Their husbands. Wait a minute. Anyway, Gert Page was my public school teacher for 8 years, and she was related to Morley that lived here. So, and
Yeah. Do you know of any like field trips you went on? I know some schools did they went to Niagara Falls as school trips, or they would just take trips out into the forest.
Yeah, we usually just went for I think twice a year, spring and fall maybe. We'd go down and we'd walk from the Triconal School to what at the time was called Whitesides. I think it's now called Daytona.
Okay.
Trailer park down here, I think it's called. I'm not sure what they call it. And we used to walk all back through the roads there and take pretty much all afternoon for everybody to walk down to the lake and then back to the school. Some had bikes, some walked.
Yeah.
Of course, the ones with the bikes, like myself, teacher said, don't go any farther ahead than I can see you.
Right.
And of course, everybody with bikes was down at the lake, splashing in the lake before she was even halfway. So everybody used to get in trouble for going too far ahead. But that's about all the trips we ever did in public schools. When I had high school, that's when things sort of speeded up for me.
Right.
They had track and field, stuff like that. And one day a phys ed teacher was outside and he was trying to determine who could run fast, who could high jump, who could pole vault, who could throw the disc and all that. So he had us running around the track, and I soon came that wasn't my cup of tea, running and racing. So myself and a couple of other guys went up to the phys ed teacher and said, we'd like to specialize in pole vaulting. And we only did that because there wasn't that much running to it. It was easier. So he said, sure, go ahead. And they had all the equipment there. And so we looked at each other and says, how do we pole vault? He wasn't about to show us. We were just supposed to learn ourselves. So we did. And we got pretty good at it. So, and eventually myself and a couple of others, we made it to when the high schools all joined together. They went to Western University for what they call WASA. I just forget what that was, but it was a sort of abbreviation for all the schools competing together at Western. So we went there, a big busload every morning. I think it was an ongoing thing, depending on how well you were doing. So, but in the pole vault, I never really ever got first, but I got second and third quite often. So, but the highest I think I ever managed to get over the pole vaulting was 10 feet, pretty much 10 feet, maybe 10 feet, foot 2. But it was good enough for second or third at Western. And the pole vaulting today, if you're seeing on television, they use fiberglass poles where they run and they jump and the pole bends almost in half and it sort of springs them way up and over.
Yeah.
To me, that's okay, but to me, that's unfair comparing them to myself. The pole I had was an aluminum pole.
Wow.
Didn't bend at all. And for 10 feet with aluminum pole, I would suspect if I converted that to if I had a fiberglass pole, I could have probably went maybe 12 or 14 feet.
Yeah.
But I never got, I was before the fiberglass pole age.
Right.
So, but we went there several years in a row, and I seemed to always wind up over there, so.
So did you do any other sports? Like, I know some schools, schoolhouses, like one-room schoolhouses, did like baseball and stuff.
When in public school, we played baseball, and we played against a couple of the other public schools. I just forget, what was your number, school number, do you remember?
USS number 1.
Yeah, she went to number 1 over on number 3 highway at the Coyne Road.
No, it was the next road.
Oh, that was
Town line.
the town line.
Okay.
At number 3 highway. There was a school there. She played there, so our school played their school. And we also played the school down to the east of here, the park. And I don't know what that one was, but I know all the Lidsters that lived in this area, they went to there and we played against their school. So, but that was pretty much the activity in public schools. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, then once got out of high school, the pole vaulting sort of ceased. And I guess then that's when I kicked back into doing this drafting course. So, which was good.
So, you mentioned earlier about Morley living here. So how did you start helping him out?
Well, I would come over just out of curiosity and see what all the smoke was and steam. When I got over there, he was boiling syrup. And I have pictures I brought today to show that. And so while I was over here, he asked me what I was doing, and I says, well, nothing. So he says, hop on the back of that sled, and he'd get his tractor going. Away we'd go right through the back of where the reenactment is, back behind here. And we'd go all through the woods. He had trails, and my sap gathering career started.
So how old would you have been roughly?
I was in public school, and I wasn't that old. I was just barely big enough to carry pails of syrup. I would say 8 to 10 maybe. But he had this big barrel, probably held maybe 90 gallons of syrup. I don't know. It's a pretty big barrel. And you just go to the trees. He usually went to the left of his tractor and I would go to the right of his tractor. And we just dump the buckets out of the trees into our pails and then come back, and you just put the pail up to the edge of the thing, the sap container, and then just dump it in. It ran down a tapered chute through a hole into the bucket, so you didn't have to do a lot of extra work lifting the back of it up. You just hit it against the barrel and let it splash into the to the bucket. Sometimes he would get stuck going back through. There's a big waterway at the base of this hill behind here, your museum, and in the spring usually water was flowing through there, so he used to be careful. He'd like try to go fast through it, then he'd have enough momentum to get through with this bucket of syrup or sap, and then we bring it up, put it in the buckets, and he'd put more logs in the fire, and then we go back and for another load. And it seemed like it never ended. There was always more sap to get. So then he'd boil it down. I'd watch him get to the finishing stages where I guess he took the temperature and where you decide it's thick enough for the syrup. Then you pour it out of that into some other big pitcher type containers, and then he'd take it and put it in smaller containers. I forget, probably gallon cans or bottles.
So did he have like a boiling shack, or?
It wasn't really a shack. It was an open top. That picture right there. And it was open so the steam just went up into the air. And if it rained real hard, I don't know what he did, but it would probably, some would get into the syrup, but it would boil out.
Right.
It would boil out. So I used to help him do a lot of that. In summer, he used to put hay in the barn, and he had a tractor, and I got the position of the tractor driver. When you pull he came up with a big load of hay on his wagon to the front of the barn. He'd stick a big fork into the hay, and it had fins on the bottom that would stick in to hold it. And through pulleys hooked to the tractor, he'd give me the wave, and I'd have to drive to the end of the barn. That would mean I'm pulling up the hay, and when it hit the top, I would go in the barn on a track. Then he'd pull a little rope where he wanted to dump it up in the barn. And I used to be the tractor driver for that. And then when I got to the end of my pull, then I'd have to back the tractor up for the next load. But I used to help him with bringing in the corn stalks. Like he'd pile the corn and put them in stalks. You don't see that anymore much. The odd time. And when he brought the corn stalks in, he would just take a fork and ram it into the corn, get one clump of corn, and just kept loading on his wagon until it was full. But when he got down to the end, there was like 50 mice lived in the bottom of that corn stalk thing there. So I wasn't too impressed with that. I usually, when I was helping him, my wife, I tell her that I used to jump up in the tongue so the mice wouldn't come over there. Keep away from the mice. So I helped him with the corn, the syrup, and the hay.
So how long were you helping him then? Like how many years were you?
I think pretty much 3 or 4 years while I was at public school. But once I hit high school, I kind of lost track of, I didn't help him as much because I was busy doing high school activities and stuff. I don't know how he got along without me, but